Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads. We're going to start A Little Princess. Chapter 1. Sara arrives in London. Once on a dark winter's day when the fog was so thick in London that the lamps were lighted and the shops blazed as they do at night, a young girl rode with her father in a horse-drawn cab slowly through the streets. She sat with her feet tucked under her and leaned against her father. She stared thoughtfully out the window at the passers-by. A girl with a vivid imagination, Sara was always dreaming about grown-up people and their world. She felt that she herself had lived a long, long time. Maybe she was mostly thinking how strange it was she had heard her parents talk about the letters their children wrote home. Although Sara was attracted by her father's stories of the voyage they would make to the new country, she was greatly unhappy that they would be separated. Sara, he said, you will grow up so fast that in a year you will be big enough to come back to India and take care of me. The thought of coming home and keeping house for her father and being his hostess sometimes appealed to Sara tremendously. So she had to go to school in England for a while before being grown up enough for that. She had made up her mind to do so. Well, Papa, she said softly, I suppose we must resign to being apart. Captain Crewe laughed. Oh, Sara Sunshine, he said, calling her his favorite pet name for her and kissing on the forehead. He was not really at all resigned himself, but he felt he must keep that a secret. He and Sara hadn't always been very close, and knew he would be lonely when he returned to the empty house in India. So when their horse-drawn cab rolled into the big dull square that was their destination, Captain Crewe held his daughter more tightly than ever. The house was big and dull, just like all the others in the row, but on the front door there was a brass plate with these words engraved in black letters. Miss Minchin, boarding school for girls. Here we are, Sara, said Captain Crewe, trying to sound as cheerful as possible. And then he lifted her out of the cab, and they walked up the stairs and rang the doorbell. A housekeeper ushered them through the hall and into the drawing room. As she sat in one of the stiff mahogany chairs, Sara looked at her father and said, I don't like it here, Papa, but then I suppose soldiers, even brave ones, don't like going into battle. It was just then that Miss Minchin entered the room. She was just like her home, Sara thought, tall and dull, respectable and ugly. She had large, cold, expressionless eyes and a rather forced smile. However, she brightened up when she met Captain Crewe. She had heard such flattering things about him from Lady Meredith, a parent who had recommended the school to him. Apparently, the captain was a wealthy man who was willing to spend a great deal of money on his little daughter. It would be a great privilege to have such a beautiful and promising child as a student, Captain Crewe, Miss Minchin said, taking Sara's hand in hers. Lady Meredith tells me she's quite clever. Sara stood quietly with her eyes fixed on Miss Minchin's face. Why does she say I'm a beautiful child? She thought. I am not beautiful at all. Sara was mistaken in thinking that she was not attractive. The truth was that she had a special charm all her own. Still, Sara did not care for Miss Minchin's flattery, and after Sara had known Miss Minchin for a little while, she discovered she said the same thing to all the new parents anyway. It was decided that Sara was going to be a parlor boarder. That meant she would have a pretty bedroom and sitting room all her own. I am not worried about her education, Captain Crewe said confidently as he held Sara's hand. The problem is we're keeping her from learning too fast. Please see that she rides her pony and plays with more dolls. Papa, said Sara, dolls ought to be our best friends. Emily's going to be my best friend. Who is Emily? Miss Minchin asked. She's a doll Papa's going to buy for me, Sara said solemnly. She will be my best friend for a while while Papa's gone. What an imaginative child, Miss Minchin exclaimed. What a darling little creature. Yes, said Captain Crewe, drawing Sara closer. She is. Take good care of her for me. Sara stayed with her father at his hotel for several days before he sailed back to India. They went shopping and put together a large wardrobe, much too grand for a child of her age. Afterwards, Sara and her father went to a number of different toy stores. They looked at a great many dolls. They didn't find Emily, so they decided to look in the shop windows and let their cab follow them. Just as they approached a small shop that looked intriguing, Sara suddenly clutched her father's arm and cried, Oh, Papa, there's Emily. Let's go in and get her. Emily was purchased at once, and Sara and the captain looked at her to a children's dress shop where the doll was measured for a wardrobe every bit as grand as Sara's. The next day, he looked to Sara to Miss Minchin's. It was time to leave her there. He explained to Miss Minchin that his lawyers would pay all of Sara's bills. He planned to write to Sara twice a week and said she was given everything she asked for. He went into Sara's sitting room and they said their goodbyes. Sara held his coat labels in her hands, looking long and hard at his face. "Are you learning me by heart?" he asked, stroking her hair. "No," she says. "I know you by heart. You are inside my heart." Captain Crew's cab rode away from the school. When Miss Minchin sent her sister, Miss Amelia, to see how Sara was, she could not open the door. "I have locked it," said a sad, polite little voice from inside. "I would like to be alone." Miss Amelia was fat and dumpy and very much in awe of her sister, Miss Minchin. Miss Amelia was much better natured of the two, but she never crossed Miss Minchin. Quickly, she ran downstairs. "I've never seen such a funny, old-fashioned child, sister," she said. She had locked herself in her room and is not making a sound. "It is much better than if she kicked and screamed, as some of them do," Miss Minchin said haughtily. "I expected a child as spoiled as she is when you set the whole house in an uproar. If ever a child was ever given away in anything, it is Sara." "I have been opening her trunks and putting things away," said Miss Amelia. "I never saw the like. She will look very well when we take the girls to church on Sundays. She has been provided for as if she were a little princess," replied Miss Minchin. Upstairs, Sara and Emily sat at the windowsill. Captain Crew looked backward, waving and blowing kisses. Sara stared at the corner until long after the cab disappeared. And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.